So, what exactly are your energetic rhythms, and how can they help you shift out of distraction, chaos, and burnout and instead into optimal productivity, balance, and focus without giving up your action oriented nature? I answer these questions and more in episode 40 of the Health, Harmony, and Happiness with Kathy podcast. Welcome to Health, Harmony, and Happiness with Kathy. I'm your host, Kathy Stricker. I'm a state patrol wife, mama to 3 lively kiddos, a yoga teacher, certified NLP coach, and an energetic rhythms expert. As an energetic rhythms coach, I help action-taking women use their body's rhythms and the moon's cycle to optimize productivity and avoid burnout without letting their desire to remain in control alter their focus. And this podcast is all about doing just that and perhaps a bit more so that you can create your own path to health, harmony, and happiness. So come along with me and may this episode serve as a nudge to discover tools that could help you on your path towards more intentional living. Enjoy the show. Hey friends, welcome to the show. Today we are talking all about energetic rhythms and what they are and why you need to know about them. Energetic rhythms is really a term that I have come up with to use in my business to basically describe what it is I do. Now, I primarily work with women, but we all have energetic rhythms. We all have those tendencies. I just haven't studied the male cycle as much as the feminine cycle or the women's cycle. But that being said, I'm absolutely not saying that men don't have cyclical times. I know that they do. And their initial cyclical renewal is on a daily basis, whereas ours is on more of a 28-day cycle. I talked about that a little bit more in the previous episode. So head back over to that episode if you missed it. But for now, we're talking primarily about what energetic rhythms are. Now, as I define energetic rhythms, they are a combination of both your innate rhythms and the lunar cycle and how they work together to either support you or to sabotage you. Yes, they can very much sabotage you if you're not using them to your benefit, right? And when they sabotage you, it is the result, or what results rather, is burnout, feeling stuck, feeling like you're spinning your wheels, feeling so exhausted or cycling through periods of extreme exhaustion and motivation, or not even having the motivation to do anything more. That's lots of times what happens when you're not working with your energetic rhythms. So that's what I help you do. Why does this matter to you? Because we were created or designed to use them. Right? When you live in alignment with your rhythms and work with them instead of against you, life flows instead of feeling like you are that salmon swimming upstream, just trying your hardest to get to where you want to go. It doesn't have to be that challenging. Yes, of course, there are challenging times in life and we can work through those, but it's a lot easier when your perspective is that 1, we are all cyclical and it all comes back around. And 2, that we can work with our natural rhythms and use that energy, use the energy that is around us and surrounding us from the universe to help us. It makes life easier. So when I talk about energetic rhythms, I mentioned that it's both your innate rhythms and the lunar cycle. Let's unpack first what those innate rhythms are. Your innate rhythms are the ones that you're born with, right? They are your body's response to hormones and the physical elements that impact your health, like your movement, your nutrition, stress, sleep. These also include our body's natural responses over the course of a day, week, month, season, or even year. They're comprised of your infradian rhythms, your circadian rhythm, and ultradian rhythms. Okay, so those 3 things we're going to talk about a little bit more. Let's start with the infradian rhythm. Your infradian rhythm, and you probably have never heard it called this before, but this is essentially what your menstrual cycle is. So infradian rhythm is defined as your body's physical, mental, emotional, and behavioral rhythm with a period of time lasting this is the key part, it's a period of time lasting longer than a day and less than a year. And it's influenced by your body's sex hormones, by your thyroid hormones, and by your adrenal hormones. So, if you didn't know that actually had a name, that rhythm in your body had a name, that's what it is. And it's influenced by your endocrine system. So let's first talk about the menstrual cycle. This is primarily what I focus on when working with women. And we talk about what your menstrual cycle is currently doing, and then perhaps some healing of it and how to go about healing it. So the menstrual cycle, as defined, is during the reproductive years, the period of time involving the fluctuation of hormones to prepare the female body for conception or shedding of the uterine lining if conception is not achieved. This cycle lasts anywhere between 22 and 35 or more days and consists of 4 energetic phases: the period or menstruation, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. So I broke that down into 4 phases. Technically, you could zoom out a little bit more and put it into 2 phases. And putting the period and follicular phase as one, those technically are the entire follicular phase, those first 2 phases of your cycle. And the second 2 phases are the ovulatory and luteal, and that's also known as the luteal phase. I just break it down because it makes more sense, and you'll understand why as you listen and as you stay with me through this podcast. But those 4 phases are what mirror the energetic rhythms framework that I have come up with. And those 4 phases are rest and intention setting, planning or beginning to take action, being present with taking intentional action, and then finally, wrapping up, reflecting, and celebrating. Those 4 phases beautifully align with the 4 phases of our menstrual cycle. Now, if you're sitting out there and you're thinking, what? I didn't even know my menstrual cycle had 4 phases. I thought it was literally just that I had a period each month. Well, friends, it's much more complex than that. And if you didn't know that, I'm glad you're here because you're going to learn a lot. Definitely. Things are always working in your body. And maybe you did know that you had more, that it was more than just your period. Maybe you knew it was period and ovulation, but there's other stuff going on throughout the month as well. There's those transition phases. Just like the moon has the transition phases, just like we all have transition phases when we're moving from deciding to do a project to actually doing the project, right? There's transition phases to get to that point and to get out of that point. So that is what makes up your menstrual cycle, okay? In order to know where you're at with your menstrual cycle, tracking is essential in the beginning, especially in the beginning. Definitely tracking is essential if you're using your menstrual cycle as part of the fertility awareness method, which is actually why I got started tracking my menstrual cycle. When my husband and I were trying to have kids, we were using, that's when it was. We weren't using the fertility awareness method yet, but we were trying to have kids. And so tracking my cycle became essential. But fertility awareness method, because I didn't want to use oral contraceptives anymore or hormonal contraceptives anymore after our first child. So we started using fertility awareness method. And that's a whole nother episode as well. But definitely you're tracking your menstrual cycle if you are using that. And even if you are tracking, maybe you didn't even realize that you have 4 phases. I know I didn't in the beginning. So something to chew on for a bit. In the next episode that you'll hear after this episode, we're going to talk all about tracking your cycle and what that looks like and how to use the tool that I have to track your cycle, which is my daily rhythms tracker. And you can find that on the show notes to this page, which would be KarenYogaWellness.com/podcast40, or you can find, you'll have the link there, or you can find the actual tracker at KarenYogaWellness.com/rhythms tracker. And you can download your own daily energetic rhythms tracker. And this is what I have clients use to get a picture of what their rhythms look like, because it encompasses so much more than just tracking your menstrual cycle. It also encompasses body, mind, emotional, spiritual, and I'm sure some other stuff in there too, but I don't have it in front of me right now. And that's not what we're talking about today. So I'm going to stay on task, friends. Okay, so you've got your infradian rhythm, and that's primarily your menstrual cycle. Remember, that's the period of time lasting longer than a day, less than a year, and that is involving your body's endocrine system, your sex hormones, your thyroid hormones, and your adrenal hormones, right? So that's the infradian rhythm. That's one of your rhythms. That's the one that I primarily focus on. That's why I've got so much to say about it, friends. Okay. The next rhythm I'm going to talk to you about is the seasonal rhythm. Now, this one, I'm not really sure it's actually really a technical, science-proven term or way of looking at life, but it's one that I use because it makes sense to me. So the seasonal rhythm, I define that as a period of time in which the energetic qualities of a natural world season are embodied and lived out in your own life. So what this means is basically you could be in a period of winter in your life. Maybe winter, let's use this example. Last fall, I decided I really needed to be going into a winter in my life, okay? At least in my business life. I needed to move inward, tune inward, do some underground work, basically, do some deep contemplation, work, thinking, just being with the work that I was doing. And so I really set aside a lot of extra outside work that I may have been doing and just really tuned into getting in tune with myself, with my business, with some of the fundamentals of what I wanted to be doing. And a lot of the work that you're hearing in this podcast is coming from that work that I did during that winter season. That didn't mean that my personal life was in a winter season. That very much went through natural fluctuations. And there were times when I was feeling like I was in summer, where in summer, you're putting yourself out there. You are in full bloom. You are engaging with others, connecting with others. But in winter, it's kind of like the winter season that we have. If you live in a place where there are 4 seasons, it's kind of like the winter. Everybody kind of goes inward and we all kind of get quiet. The ground does this. The earth does this. The plants do this, right? Everybody has this winter season. So when I talk about using or what seasonal rhythm do you feel as though you're in, I'm talking about what seasonal rhythm or what season you feel as though you're reflecting in both your business or your work and your family life or your social life. They could all be different. They may align with the natural seasonal rhythms, or they may not. So another example would be that maybe you want to spend more time with your kids in the summer because they're off. So maybe you take a winter from your work or from your business in the summer so that you can fully be in summer with your kids when they're in summer, right? I hope this is all making sense. So you may align with the actual seasons outside, but you may not align with the actual seasons outside. I have an episode, or a Facebook Live rather, where I talk all about this. I will try to find that and link that in the show notes here as well. Okay, so you've got your infradian rhythm, your seasonal rhythm. The next one we're going to talk about is the circadian rhythm. Now, this is one that probably most people are the most familiar with because it's one that we hear about a lot, right? We hear a lot about circadian rhythms and how important sleep rhythms are, and they absolutely are. In fact, I interviewed my friend, a college friend of mine, a while back about circadian rhythms and nutrition, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Katie Standifer Lopez. I think it's called Rhythm. It's something about rhythm, nutrition, and sleep rhythms and nutrition or something like that with Katie Standifer Lopez. I will link that in the show notes. But circadian rhythms are your body's physical, mental, emotional, and behavioral rhythm with a period of time lasting 24 hours and associated with the body's natural sleep-wake cycle. It's naturally felt by the body's response to light and dark. So naturally, your body has the tendencies that it wants to quiet down and go to sleep when the sun is going down or when it is dark outside. And when the sun comes up, we have a little bit more energy, and those circadian rhythms shift with the seasons as well. And as the sun shifts, because how many of you have noticed that when it's summertime and the sun is waking up earlier, you naturally feel as though you have more energy. You naturally want to get out of bed earlier, maybe get started, maybe do more things in the morning. And maybe you naturally are staying up later or working outside in the yard or just being out later in the summer as well because it's light longer. That is a response. That's your circadian rhythm's response, right? We adjust and fluctuate with the seasons in that regard as well. Circadian rhythms are different for kids and babies versus adults. My husband and I started paying attention more to circadian rhythms when we had our first child. Babies have way different rhythms than adults, and we quickly learned that when our child became a crazy baby. And if you knew him as a child, or as a little baby, you definitely knew that. And you may have had one of these crazy babies too. But what helped us is that we actually started paying attention to when he needed to sleep and like his sleepy signs. And I did a ton of research on sleep with kids and sleep with babies and what was best for them. And with babies, sleep begets sleep. So the more sleep they get, the more they want to sleep. So gone were the days, once we realized that, of trying to keep our child somewhat awake a little bit later so that hopefully he would sleep through the night. And we started putting him to bed early. Like we were putting him to bed at, I think when we first started this, we put him to bed at 5:30, between 5:30 and 6, and he slept until 6 or 6:30 the next morning. And then we fell into a regular pattern when he was a baby of going to bed at 6 or 6:30, and he would still sleep until between 6 and 7, which is pretty dang good. And once we figured that out, life changed for us drastically. So circadian rhythms are so incredibly important. And that's another one of our rhythms. I don't necessarily focus on those as much with my clients, but it is an element and it is a part that has to be paid attention to. And then the final rhythm that I am going to talk to you about today is the ultradian rhythms. Now, this is one you probably have never heard of, but you're probably very familiar with it when I tell you what it means. Your ultradian rhythms are your body's micro rhythms, and they happen naturally throughout the day, and they last less than 24 hours, but greater than an hour. So some of these things that you're familiar with are like your appetite, when you get hungry, when you're not hungry. Your focus is one of these micro rhythms. The energy that you feel fluctuating throughout the day, blinking, heart rate, circulation, body temperature, your cortisol levels as they fluctuate throughout the day. Those are all ultradian rhythms, and they happen without us even thinking about them. They happen, and they're often influenced by a lot of outside things, right? So our cortisol levels, those naturally go up and down, but they can very much be influenced by things like stress. Same thing with our heart rate, with our circulation, with body temperature. So a lot of these things, a lot of these ultradian rhythms are influenced by our outside environment and outside stimuli. So something to keep in mind. You've got infradian rhythms, seasonal rhythms, as I use them or as I refer to them, circadian rhythms and ultradian rhythms. And all of those rhythms work together with the lunar cycle or the lunar rhythms. And the lunar cycle is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, it's pretty complex when it comes to astrology, if you're looking at it in a much larger astrological picture. I look at it as a very basic, fundamental nature that it is. I look at it as having 4 phases, okay? It has the new moon, the waxing moon, the full moon, and the waning moon. So the new moon is when there is no moon out in the sky. You really can't see any. And then it starts to grow, and it's in that waxing phase. And then it turns into that full moon, and then it goes back down into the waning phase where it's starting to shrink and get smaller until it returns to the new moon. And wouldn't you believe it, the lunar cycle mirrors the menstrual cycle. Boom, mind blown, right? Our bodies do the exact same thing that the moon is doing, every single month. And so that's why we work with them together. And that's why we pay attention to both of them. I told you the length of the menstrual cycle is anywhere from 22 to 35 plus days, right? Well, usually when they, being authority, I guess, scientists are talking about the menstrual cycle, they often refer to it as a 28-day cycle, right? That's just kind of the average. That's easy. That's the average. Well, guess what? The lunar cycle is about 29 and a half days. So very close to what the menstrual cycle is. Now, your menstrual cycle may fluctuate and may work with the moon, which is a pretty cool thing. I will tell you that when my menstrual cycle started again after my third child, I had really been digging into this work and paying very close attention to tracking the moon and to working with the moon. And my cycle started up the day or the night before. It was the day before. It started at 4 a.m. in the morning, basically, a new moon. And I was like, oh, of course it did. Like, I wasn't even surprised by that at all. I was a little surprised because it came back before I was done nursing, and that had never happened for me before. But it was a beautiful, fun experience. So, yes, I said fun. That the menstrual cycle was a fun experience. Ladies, it is a beautiful gift that we have been given. And if you are thinking, I hate my period, I hate that time of the month, oh, friend, you need to be here because it's a beautiful sign of renewal, and we'll talk about that more in future episodes, I'm sure. Or if you work with me or join the community that I have going out there, it's just it's what it is. So the lunar cycle is something that mirrors the menstrual cycle, or the menstrual cycle mirrors the lunar cycle, right? Each phase has an energetic feel to it. Just like each phase of your menstrual cycle has an energetic feel to it, the lunar cycle has the same. And this energetic feel impacts how we engage with the world. So the thing that this also tells us is that men are also influenced by the lunar cycle, right? So the energy that we feel from the moon is not just felt by us as women, it's felt by all of humanity. Okay, it's felt by everyone. So we all have those moments where we're feeling the energy from the moon, but we really can't understand or describe or put our finger on why we feel a certain way, or why we feel so weepy, or why we feel like our emotions are so big and they're just coming out of us. Well, a lot of that can be accredited to the universal energy that we're feeling. Now, as I said, I only really focus on the basic moon stuff. I get my resources of other astrological stuff from other people, or I get my information of other astrological stuff from other resources that I follow. But there is a whole lot that comes into play with the lunar cycle. For instance, when it is in various astrological signs, it's going to have different energy, and it's going to affect you differently too. Those are things that, because as the moon is moving out in space, it's always moving through a different astrological sign. And you guys know that each astrological sign has different qualities and creates a different energy or a different feeling. So keep that in mind as well. And I focus on the very foundational level. That's just remember that. But it is still so super beneficial and helpful. So to use them, your body's rhythms show you exactly when to rest and when to take action, so you don't have to overthink life and work, right? Like, you can use the moon's energy, you can use your body's energy to help you so that you know exactly when to rest and when to take action. And then you don't have to overthink everything, and you don't have to feel like you're working your butt off all the time, trying super hard to do everything, because the harder you try, the harder life is going to feel, right? There's got to be a give and a take, an action and a rest, and you have to allow that in your life. And that's what your energetic rhythms are all about. To figure out your energetic rhythms, though, the first step is to begin tracking them. It may seem kind of like a daunting and tedious task to do, and it's just one more thing to do. But once you do it, you'll hopefully get a clear picture of what your body does each month in response to your biological cycle, as well as the lunar cycle. as I mentioned earlier, I have a tracking tool that you can use, and I'm going to talk the details, or you can listen to the next episode to learn all of the details about how to use that tracking tool. But this is the absolute first step. Now, I'm not saying you have to track your cycle forever and ever and ever, because once you get a picture of what your body does, and I would say that the majority of people will be able to find those rhythms. There's a few outliers that maybe don't have exact rhythms, and maybe there's other stuff going on with their body. For instance, maybe there's other chemical imbalances, or maybe there's deeper healing that needs to happen nutritionally or otherwise. So keep that in mind. But you never know unless you begin to track. So you have to begin to track. I generally recommend tracking for at least 3 months in the beginning so you can have a good picture of what your body is doing and of what the moon is doing. Okay, I'm going to try and wrap this up because I've been going way longer than I wanted to, but I hope that you have found this beneficial. So we're going to talk tracking in the next episode, but that's where you have to begin to know where your energetic rhythms are so that you can use those rhythms to know when to take action, when to rest, what to do when you are taking action, and what not to do, or what to just be still with. So, one other question before I wrap this up, though. What do you do if you don't have a menstrual cycle, right? What do you do if you're through that part of your life? Or what about hormonal birth control? What if you're taking those sorts of things? Well, easy solution. Here's what you do. You just get to use the moon. You just get to focus on how the moon is impacting your energy. And that is the beautiful thing. That makes it super simple. You don't have to balance the two energies if you don't have a menstrual cycle or if your menstrual cycle is impacted by hormonal contraceptives. So keep that in mind. All right, so head on over to KarenYogaWellness.com/rhythms tracker to get started tracking your rhythms, and then listen to the next episode or print that rhythms tracker off and bring it with you to the next episode so that you can learn how to use the tracker, how you'll learn what's the most essential to begin tracking in the beginning and what is non-essential, what can wait. Like I said, you don't have to track forever. It's one of those things that once you get an idea of your rhythms, you can set it aside for periods of time and then come back to it when you're feeling like you need to dig into your life a little bit more and dig into maybe something that is really keeping you stuck. Okay, friends, you can get all of these show notes and all the links at KarenYogaWellness.com/podcast40. And I will see you in the next episode. Cheers to cultivating greater health, harmony, and happiness in your life. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, help us grow this podcast by sharing it with even just one other person. And it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment of your time to write a review. Your comments and feedback are what help me continue to bring you topics and guests that can help you and others on their journey in creating health, harmony, and happiness. Remember to head on over to KarenYogaWellness.com to get the show notes and links from today's episode. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Karen Yoga Wellness, and to continue connecting with more resources that could help you enhance health, harmony, and happiness in your own life, subscribe to this podcast. Thanks again for listening.